Christmas is one of the most widely celebrated holidays on planet Earth, and is by far the most visual. Once Halloween comes to an end, the pumpkins are thrown away, and out comes the fat man in a red suit. Whether you enjoy this lengthy celebration or not, it's not hard to at least enjoy one of the many things about the holiday season. Maybe it's the food, the decor, or perhaps the topic of today's video, the Christmas specials. Christmas specials have been around for decades, with just about any television show that can allow its story to run through Christmas likely having one. In Japan, the celebration of this holiday may be different than in the Western world, but it shows it takes it just as seriously. And of course, that means in terms of anime as well. Just off the top of your heads, I want you to think about your favorite Christmas arc or special in anime. It can be how Kyon discovers how much he truly loves Haruhi's antics in the disappearance of Haruhi Suzumiya, or maybe how Kirito reacts to Sachi's Christmas gift in the early episodes of Sword Art Online. Even if it's an anime that some people haven't even heard of, there's no doubt that Christmas can sometimes bring out the best in what anime has to offer. Seeing how in Japan, Christmas Eve is usually seen as a night for couples to spend together, it isn't uncommon for the trope to be adapted for romance anime. It isn't uncommon for these episodes to be some of the best the show has to offer, as is the case with Toradora. Now if you're thinking to yourself, didn't he already make a video on Toradora? Well yes, I did, just over a year ago as a matter of fact, but that was looking at Toradora as a whole. It was about what made it the greatest romance anime of all time in my opinion, and if you're interested you can go check it out before I get into this one. As you hear in that video, I said something along the lines of Toradora takes just about every trope in romance anime and executes it to perfection. That's exactly the case with the Christmas arc, which I did not entirely dig into in that video, because I believed it deserved its own video, and that's what I'm here to do today. Drawing closer to the anime season, I wanted to dive deeper into this arc. The first episode starts with the echoing of Ami's words to Minori, that you won't have to feel guilty. This refers back to the previous episode. After Taiga's fight with the student president, the school realized that she and Ryuji weren't a couple. Ami, able to see through everybody's mask, mentions in passing that Minori will not have to feel guilty about falling in love with Ryuji. This sits with Minori, to the point where she can hardly concentrate when she's always so focused on everything she's responsible for, no matter how many items she usually has on her plate. This loss of concentration causes her to make an error that costs her softball team its game. It's not exactly subtle, but it shows us off the bat just how much the guilt of growing emotion for Ryuji is weighing on her. Following the intro, it cuts to Ryuji and Taiga, who's fresh off her suspension. It's now when we find out it's getting closer to Christmas, and even in her 2 weeks away from school to give them space, Ryuji hasn't gotten any closer to Minori. Instead of insulting Ryuji, directly anyway, she declares that she has to help him instead, and in fact has to behave, or else Santa won't pay her a visit. Cutting to the classroom, Taiga and Ryuji find Minori wearing a bald cap and singing a song, much to the discomfort of both the duo and their classmates. After jumping on her best friend that she hasn't seen since being suspended, we find the first instance of her avoiding the two, even if it isn't abundantly clear at first. She claims to have overslept and couldn't meet with them on their walk to school, but stumbles over her own excuse as she brings up the fact that she arrived to class before both Ryuji and Taiga. And just as Ryuji tries talking to her about it, she cuts him off, playing it up to her very strange persona of mimicking movie quotes. Distracted from Minori comes a very thankful Kitamura, who quite literally lays himself down for Taiga to show his appreciation for standing up for him with the student council president, only to have her promise not to get in any more fights. It seems like Kitamura and Taiga are growing closer. During lunch, the class finds out that they will be having a Christmas party on Christmas Eve. Taiga boldly proclaims that Ryuji has to invite Minori, and it's the perfect opportunity for him to confess. Taiga is selected as the person in charge of setting up the party, and of course drags Ryuji in as well. However, Minori declines to help or even attend the party, claiming that she can't spend her time partying after losing the softball game in such an embarrassing way. As we'll come to find out, it's clearly just another excuse. Getting the party together would require a lot of time to set up, and would require Minori to spend that time near Taiga and Ryuji. Somewhere it's becoming increasingly evident that she doesn't want to be. This only grows more evident when a group of students agree to meet and study at a restaurant that Minori works at. She declines the invitation to join, saying that she has a shift to work. Upon arriving, this is confirmed to be a lie. Taiga catches on immediately, wondering just exactly why she's avoiding Ryuji. Before they can dive into it, their classmates arrive, and instantly begin to play matchmaker with Taiga and Kitamura, much to the dismay of Kihara and Ryuji. It's at this point we start to see hesitancy in Ryuji letting Taiga go. The entire series to this point was to get Taiga and Kitamura together, but now the other people are getting involved, and he isn't such a fan of the situation. Even he can't figure out why, and it isn't until Kihara begins to cheer Takasu on that the realization begins to set in, even if Ryuji isn't aware of it himself. Although Kihara is clearly just cheering Ryuji on because it means that Taiga and Kitamura wouldn't date, she's the first one to directly point out that Takasu has feelings for Taiga, at least in a non-rumor sort of way. While the entire class had basically paired Taiga and Ryuji together since the early episodes, this was the first occasion in which somebody directly confronted either of the two about being in love with the other. Even Ami, though she was aware herself, never told the two anything. As we move into the second episode of the arc, it jumps into the beginning of setup for the Christmas party. Takasu and Taiga bump into their teacher in the hall, quite literally, and have to take the time to clean up. Ryuji and their teacher Yuri spend a bit of time talking about the importance of balancing their studies and the party. After reminding them not to let the setup get in the way of their grades, she does say to enjoy themselves, and that it would only be right for the students who have worked so hard to have a night of happiness. Just before arriving to help at the party, Minori runs into the duo, although doesn't need an excuse to run off like she had in the past, as her softball coach was demanding the team to hurry to practice. Again, Ryuji invites Minori to the party, but she's pulled away by another team member before she can inevitably turn him down. Cutting to the gym, the class has already gotten started on the setup, working on the decorations and placements for the celebration. Once again, Taiga and Kitamura are paired up by their classmates and sent out on their own. This time, however, Nanako is there to help Kihara out by tagging them along with Kitamura and Taiga, clearly aware of her friend's feelings towards the student council president. With Ami and Ryuji left alone in storage, Ryuji begins to talk about how annoying he finds everybody's meddling when it comes to Taiga and Kitamura. This is somewhat out of character for Takasu, but in a not so obvious way. It's natural for Ryuji to take care of people, but until recently, he and Taiga have meddled in each other's love lives by devising plans to get Minori and Kitamura to fall in love with them. The entire situation has made even Ryuji become something he's not, which is a hypocrite. It isn't because Ryuji is upset with his friends trying to get friends together, it's because he helped Taiga and Kitamura get together to this point. The fact that it's a true possibility as he's realizing his feelings for her bothers him. Back to the conversation with Ami, she picks up on what's happening rather quickly. She spins the situation in a comparison to playing house, Ryuji and Minori as the parents, and Taiga as their child. Of course, it's not that simple. It's obvious to even the viewers at this point that Taiga and Ryuji are falling in love with each other, and Ami points this out as calling their relationship unnatural. In her words, they're playing pretend, and it's a dangerous game that's going to end up getting somebody hurt. She encourages him to stop and forget all about his relationship with Taiga. Then, just out of earshot with Ryuji, she mentions how the two of them should start over as well. While the last episode was the first verbal mention of Ryuji being in love with Taiga, this is the first time we see the love Ami has for Ryuji. Takasu is the closest friend Ami has, even more so than Kitamura. They talk about things that they can't with the others. It's understandable that she would fall in love with someone as selfless as Ryuji, but she knows that he's in love with Taiga, while still harboring feelings for Minori. The only way she and Takasu would stand a chance would be to completely start over. It's obviously impossible to do so, which is why she doesn't repeat herself when Takasu doesn't hear her. Following the examination period, the class is free to only worry about the upcoming holiday. Once more, Taiga and Ryuji attempt to ask Minori to grab food, but are once more turned down by saying she has to keep practicing because of her softball coach. Taiga even had a plan to leave their meal early to allow them time to talk on their own. This does come in handy, as both Kihara and Nanako try to steal Takasu away for lunch themselves, likely to game plan a way for him to steal Taiga away from Kitamura. Using Taiga's chores as an excuse, he's able to escape to her apartment, where he finds the massive amounts of presents she plans on sending home to her family. While they're heading to the post office, Taiga talks about the orphanage she would regularly help out at while she was in a Catholic school growing up. She wants to be as happy as everybody else during Christmastime, which is something that's hard for her given her broken family. She also tells Ryuji of the time she met Santa, and the inspiration for the behavior at Christmas. Her reason for bringing the presents to the orphanage is to remind them that somebody's keeping an eye on them, doing it as much for them as she does herself, to reassure her that she isn't alone, with somebody always watching out for her. Back at the gym, the students have started setting up the Christmas tree, with everybody inside enjoying the time as they do so. As the tree is constructed, Ryuji realizes how far Taiga has come in the last year. She isn't on her own anymore, with her group of friends and classmates all watching over her, instead of her needing to remind herself that Santa does, whether he exists or not. Yuri's words echo in Ryuji's mind, how things will all work out, and everybody will be happy, because it would only be right for it to do so. Just as the class finishes setting up the tree, Taiga asks Kitamura to place her favorite star upon the tree. They close the curtains and light up the tree. Just as the students admire their work, a softball breaks the glass and hits the tree, sending both it and Taiga's star falling to the ground. Minori comes in to apologize, only to realize the result of her accident. The class works to put the tree back together, as Minori scoops together the broken glass of the star in order to try and fix it. Although Ryuji and Taiga do their best to insist it isn't her fault, Minori can't help but blame herself for breaking something so important to Taiga. That's especially because she wasn't paying attention, leading to the accident. When they offer help to put it back together, Minori shouts at them. Minori was so bubbly and happy at the beginning of the show, but ever since that passing comment from Ami, that wasn't quite the case. She's clearly lacking focus. She's repeatedly bailed on her best friend, and this all led to breaking Taiga's decoration. She's realizing how much this situation is taking a toll on herself, and now it's starting to affect the people around her. The star itself was a metaphor for the events of the anime to this point. Before this arc, there had been dramatic moments, but the show was just a normal romantic comedy. They were all friends who were falling in love with each other, but at the turn, it's become so much more than that. As the star in its original state represents their group of friends, teasing each other and laughing, it's now shattered, which is why Minori wants to fix it on her own. She's always been independent, and she's always taken care of her own issues, but she can't really do that anymore. She's having to rely on others in order to make things right, something that she doesn't want to do. Minori doesn't want to be a burden with her friends, and it's why she's been avoiding them to this point. She's just as selfless as Ryuji, likely a reason why she's fallen in love with him. Even in this situation, where she's begging to fix the mess she believes she's made on her own, Takasu's there to help her. He doesn't want Minori to think he's taking pity on her, or helping her because he thinks it'll cheer her up. Takasu likely realizes that her acting so strangely is more than just because of this broken star. He reiterated that he's doing it because he wants to. It's the kind of person Ryuji is. Minori knew this, but this situation just reminded her of why she's fallen for him. She begins to cry, speaking his name in whispers as they fix the star, only for him to remind her that he's there for her. Minori has been ignoring her feelings for Ryuji, and tried to push them down by avoiding him and their group of friends. But she can't run away from him in this situation, which is the same reason she didn't want to be there in the first place. She's desperately in love with him. It's why she can't say anything more than his name. If she does, Minori knows she'll likely tell him her honest feelings. This is the closest she'll ever come to confessing to him directly. As the star is finally put back together, Ryuji reassures Minori that just because it's broken, it doesn't mean it can't be fixed. Another reference to how she feels about their group of friends and how complicated things have become. Just as Minori leaves once the star is repaired, Takasu chases her down to invite her yet again to the party. She still declines, insisting that she doesn't deserve to be there. Ryuji ends the episode responding to Minori, blatantly declaring that she won't be going, by simply telling her that he's going to wait for her. And with that, we start the final episode of the arc, beginning with Ryuji attempting one final time to invite Minori to the party. He calls and leaves a message on her phone. It's the day of the party, and Taiga's on her way over to Ryuji's to get ready. Cutting to the party, Kitamura gives a brief speech that allows the festivities to kick off. Takasu, waiting to see if Minori shows up, mans the punch bowl. In the middle of conversation with Haruta and Noto, Ami and Taiga begin a surprise performance for the class. Doing this is a small montage of what the other characters outside of the party are up to. Minori walking on her own amidst a group of couples, Yuri at her housing seminar, and even the orphans opening the gifts Taiga sent to Santa. Following the song, Minori listens to the message that Ryuji sent earlier in the episode in her bed, clearly not dressed to go anywhere remotely close to the party. Ami stops by the table where Ryuji's serving his punch, telling him that Taiga left to tell Minori to go to the party before going home and waiting for Santa. Things begin to click in Ryuji's mind, imagining Taiga on her own once again, something he promised he wouldn't do after the situation with her father. Taiga herself is sitting in her own apartment, thinking to herself about the situation that would surely come about with Ryuji and Minori. If everything works out as planned, she knows she'll be on her own. She falls asleep on her chair, only to be woken up by the knocking on her window. Upon opening it, Taiga finds Santa trying to get in. She pulls him inside and shows him her Christmas tree, which he immediately approves of. Taiga enjoys his company, hugging him as they dance around her apartment. Eventually the two fall to the ground, and she removes the head. Of course, it wasn't actually Santa, but Ryuji in a holiday costume, so Taiga wouldn't have to be alone on Christmas. She thanks him, not just for showing up in such a costume, but for everything he's done up to this point, before demanding he returns to the party and insisting that Minori is on her way. Taiga chases Ryuji out of her apartment, telling him her gift to him was his chance to confess. Ryuji accepts and rushes off back to the school, leaving Taiga alone inside. As she returns to her living room, she notices she forgot to return Ryuji's scarf, only to discover tears falling from her eyes. She knows that Minori and Ryuji love each other, but their perfect match will mean she won't have Ryuji by her side anymore. Of course, after finally having somebody by her side for so long, she doesn't want to be on her own anymore. She chases after Ryuji, bursting onto the street only to find he's already gone. Unable to fight back tears, she screams his name as she falls to her knees. She wanted to be the one by his side, not Minori. And speaking of Minori, she sees things unfold as she walks by. While she thought she had Taiga's approval to finally recognize the feelings she and Takasu have for each other, this makes her backtrack. She realizes Taiga is sacrificing her own happiness for her two best friends to be together. Taiga wants her friends to be happy, but she can't stand the idea of being alone yet again. Taiga had always been so abrasive with Ryuji, and of course rarely showed her appreciation for him. Fading to Ryuji, he's now sitting outside of the school. He talks to himself, calling the idea stupid and kicking himself for thinking Minori would actually show up. Not only that, but he traded his suit for the bear costume, meaning that he has neither his phone or the present he wanted to give Minori. But at long last, Minori arrives for their confrontation, but Minori is the first to speak. She calls back to their beach trip, and the conversation they had about aliens and ghosts. She claims she didn't need to see them, a contrast to how they said they both wanted to one day see them, despite never knowing if they truly existed. With that seemingly vague sentence, she takes off, leaving Ryuji on his own to figure out her words. Ryuji pieces it together in his mind, figuring out that this was Minori's way of rejecting him. I believe that this scene is one of the most criminally underrated in the entire show. Not only is it the unsatisfying result of 19 episodes worth of work trying to get Ryuji and Minori together, but the symbolism behind her words and actions are much larger than they seem. Minori's a strange girl at times, so hearing her say that she believes in aliens, ghosts, and other creatures that may or may not be fictitious isn't out of the ordinary. But the conversation Takasu and Kushieda had at the beach house that night was more than about seeing monsters. The topic of that discussion was really love. It's mentioned in the beginning of the show that the thing that Ryuji and Taiga describe in the first episode is something you can't hold, but everybody chases. That's referring to love. Minori says she believes in these creatures despite never seeing one. To that point, Minori hadn't been in love before, but she knew it existed. But when Ryuji says that she hopes she can see a UFO or ghost one day, it's what sparks the connection. Believing in those monsters is the equivalent of Minori's love for Ryuji. Seeing one would be realizing her love for him, and the two becoming a couple. When she turns him down, she says she doesn't need to see one, and believes it's for the better. Notice how she never said she doesn't believe in them. It's just that they would be better off not seeing one. Minori isn't saying that she doesn't love Ryuji, but it's better for the two of them to not realize the love they have for one another. Even as she says this, she's pulling her hat over her eyes. It's common knowledge that if somebody's lying, they can't look whoever they're lying to in the eye. That's what I think is happening with her. By pulling her hat over her eyes, she's lying to Ryuji. She doesn't truly want to reject him. In a vacuum, why would she? Minori and Ryuji would make a great couple. They both have strong feelings for one another, they never intentionally hurt each other, and have only ever wanted to make the other happy. In my honest opinion, an ending where Ryuji ends up with Minori would have made a lot of sense. They seem to be the most functional couple, and they clearly both held each other in high regard. Minori isn't turning Ryuji down because she wanted to. In fact, it's likely she wanted to accept his confession. But like the scene where they're putting the star back together, she holds herself back. She runs off immediately after, not wanting to spend any more time with Takasu because she knows he'll likely piece things together. And it's quite possible she's running off because she's about to cry, much like she does after Taiga and Ryuji run off together in later episodes. At the end, after Takasu collapses, hearing Minori's response, the song Taiga and Ami sang at the party begins to play along a brief montage of the group of friends. Calling back to Yuri's words, everything will work out because it would just be right, couldn't be farther from the truth. Ami is upset with Ryuji for not listening to her words. Taiga's alone in her apartment, lonely as she's ever been on Christmas. Minori is walking through the snow, having to accept the fact that she turned down the man she loved. Ryuji was convinced that everything would work out because it was meant to. In reality, on that Christmas Eve, nothing did. Everything fell apart. Even with the final shot of the episode, Ami glanced at the star that Minori and Ryuji repaired, perhaps even wondering if Ryuji was right. If something that was broken could be fixed, it seemed like their group and the fun they had has been damaged beyond repair. The Christmas arc of Toradora is what I personally believe separates it from other romance shows. The way it takes a step back from comedy in the ensuing episodes, letting the drama and conflict tell a story instead of how comedy did leading up to this, is a risky move. And on the note of turning things on its head, while most Christmas specials or arcs are happy, Toradora's is the exact opposite. Nobody is remotely close to being happy. Nothing is wrapped up, and only more questions are presented. Toradora took expectations for Christmas episodes and blew them out of the water. While the show wraps up everything within the next few episodes, it isn't without more drama spilling over. But one thing is for sure, In my opinion, no anime has come close to what Toradora did with their Christmas episodes. While the holiday is normally seen as a happy and time for celebration, sometimes there's bumps in the road that would make such a time impossible. As the saying goes, without sadness, happiness has no meaning. Toradora could have easily had the Christmas special wrap up with Ryuji and Minori getting together, but instead it took the hard way out. And while I always come back to Toradora this time of year, I think it's important to remember just what makes this story so great. Everything Taiga and Ryuji go through, from the fights and bickering to the laughs and jokes, they were all necessary stepping stones. Yuri is actually right. Everything in the end works out because it would only be right to do so. So if you do as I do and sit through another viewing of Toradora in time for the holiday season, maybe do so this time with friends or a loved one. It's a story that anybody can enjoy. So for now, thank you for watching, Merry Christmas, and a Happy Holidays.